Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I'm Beatrice Marshall, live in Nairobi. Also ahead in the next 1 hour. Zimbabwe's infrastructure bearing the brunt of a budget deficit. We take a look at the efforts to remedy current road conditions. And rolling out the red carpet, Morocco all set to host FIFA Clubs World Cup. We begin this bulletin in Kenya, where at least 50 heads of state and government are expected as guests, expected in the capital Nairobi Thursday, to celebrate Kenya's 50th independence anniversary. Now, these celebrations will be led by the country's President Uhuru Kenyatta, whose father was the first president in independent Kenya. And as CCTV's Jane Keo tells us, it is all systems go for what is arguably Kenya's biggest celebration in the country that has witnessed.
December 12, 1963, the lowering of the Union Jack, a symbol of British colonialism in exchange for Kenya's flag, marked independence. Freedom from the colonial yoke that held the country for more than half a century. And the man to lead the optimistic, enthusiastic, independent Kenya was Jomo Kenyatta, who had played a major role in the freedom struggle. He was Kenya's first prime minister and later founding president. 50 years on, his son Uhuru Kenyatta will repeat the same routine, but as Kenya's fourth president.
I'm proud and not proud, 50-50.
We have tried, but we could do better. We could do better, definitely.
And Kenyans agree that indeed the country has grown in leaps and bounds, becoming the regional economic powerhouse, playing a pivotal role in fostering peace in the region, an outstanding achievement perhaps being Sudan's comprehensive peace agreement that eventually led to the birth of South Sudan, Africa's 54th nation. In the same spirit of enforcing peace, Kenya's defense forces are currently leading in the war against the Islamic Al-Shabaab militants who control parts of central and south Somalia and whose terrorist activities are a threat to international security. Despite these and many other milestones, Kenya has had its fair share of challenges, the biggest post-independent test being the deadly 2007-2008 post-election violence, which almost brought the country on the brink of civil war. More than 1,000 people died following a political dispute over the presidential elections. Today, President Uhuru and his deputy William Ruto are a stark reminder of the black spot on Kenya's 50-year history. They both face charges at the International Criminal Court for their alleged role in the violence. Tonight, many Kenyans will keenly follow the launch of the 50th anniversary celebrations at the historic Uhuru Gardens. And as they acknowledge the achievements made over the years, they admit the journey remains long.
Talk about the unemployment rate, many youths like us, I being one of them, we are unemployed, although we have undergone certain level of education, but there's no job. Poverty rate is still high.
The challenge we need still to democratize our system more, and we need to devolve the powers.
Well, despite the numerous challenges and hurdles, Kenyans still remain hopeful, and for now they are just happy to be engaged in one huge nationwide 50th anniversary party. Jane Keo, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, as Kenya celebrates 50 years since gaining self-rule, a Kenyan man born on the cusp of independence looks back at how his country has changed and what the ideal future should be. CCTV's Carol Oyola brings us the story of Frederick Njenga, an entrepreneur who runs a small butchery on the outskirts of the Kenyan capital, Nairobi.
Charging up for a long day, Frederick Njenga has a quiet breakfast at his home in Gikavura, a small rural village on the outskirts of Kenya's capital, Nairobi. He's got a busy day ahead. He runs his own butchery in a town about 10 kilometers away. Njenga was born in 1963, when Kenya gained independence from Britain after nearly 70 years of colonization. His parents wanted their son to get a good education, but poverty was still very much a reality of post-colonial Kenya at the time, and they could not afford to pay school fees.
I
completed primary school in 1980, then I went to high school. I studied for the first 2 terms, but then we couldn't afford the fees, so I was forced to quit. Living in the village, in a rural area, you have to think about what else you will do. So I decided to start a business with the money I had saved, working people's farms, and that's how I started.
The first order of business for the 63-year-old butcher is a trip to the livestock market to buy supplies. He does not own a car, so he uses public transport. While life can be hard and money is tight sometimes, Jenga believes Kenya has made significant progress over the years.
If you think back to the early 1970s, there were no paved roads or tapped water. Electricity wasn't accessible to all people. And today, most people have electricity in their homes. Many of the main roads are tarmac, so the government has tried.
At the market, Jenga bargains for a fair price for a goat. He usually buys a goat at about $125 US, but today he has to pay $160. The extra cost will mean he has to charge his customers more if he is to make a profit. While there are larger suppliers of meat in Kenya, many people still rely on small-scale traders like Jenga, who sell meat at a relatively lower cost. When asked what he hopes the future holds, not just for himself but for Kenya too, Jenga is non-committal.
I can't tell you what the future of the country will be, but ask me about business. All we want is for us to be able to make a living.
With an economy that's growing at about 4.5% per year, unemployment remains one of Kenya's biggest challenges. For men like Jenga, learning to be self-reliant has been a vital survival skill. And like many other Kenyans, Jenga hopes that as the country marks 50 years of independence, the economy will continue to improve, giving his children and grandchildren a better chance at making a life for themselves. Carol Oyola, CCTV.
Let's now get more on Kenya's anniversary celebrations here. I'm joined by Osano Kute, a political analyst. Well, Mr. Kute, thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live. First, is there anything to celebrate for Kenya 50 years after independence?
Well, one would actually say that yes, there's something that Kenyans can celebrate after 50 years of independence, and there are also certain things that one would say that we would have done much better than what we have done in the last 50 years. What
would be the great strides that Kenya has made in the last 50 years?
Well, compared to the countries around in East and Central Africa, Kenya is one of the countries that one would say there's a lot of political freedom, and there's so much space, which compared to what has really been going on or what was going on in the last, say, 15 or 20 years ago. So Kenyans, as a people are, I would say, very free and quite a happy lot in terms of, the political freedom that exists in the country.
Well, Kenya is a dominant economy, though, in the East African region. Its economic projections are looking quite good for the coming years and for the past number of years, though. Would you say, though, that the economic assessment of Kenya, is that trickling down to the common man?
Well, I think what has actually happened is that the political leadership of Kenya in the last, say, 20 or so years has really made Kenya so liberal to the, to the effect that, the common person is really not gaining a lot in terms of whatever is coming out from the economic development. There are quite a number of people who are coming from out of the country and are enjoying a lot of freedom. They would actually get cheap money from outside, for example, and invest in things like real estate and take this money out of the country at the expense of the common man. Having said that, I do believe that if the political leadership was to come out and really become very strong and control all this, then we would actually be having the trickle-down effect of economic growth that we're projecting.
Where do you think, though, that Kenya should be concentrating in the coming years after, the first 50?
Well, I think what Kenya should be concentrating on is majorly in the infrastructural development and also the exploitation of the natural resources, the minerals that have been discovered of late. And also to try and come up with policies that will make sure that people don't fight over the same, natural resources, compared to, what is going on in places like Nigeria and other countries where people are fighting because the common person is really not gaining from what, has been discovered as natural resources.
Well, Kenya is expecting about 50 heads of state and government and their representatives for the celebrations. That's quite a large gathering.
Yes, it's actually quite a large gathering, although not as large as what Nelson Mandela, pulled out, a day or so ago. but it's a large gathering. And if you look at Kenya compared to other countries in Africa, then quite a number of heads of states would really be, want to come in and, celebrate with Kenyans, because Kenya as a country has really moved, forward in economic and political development.
All right. Just briefly, though, what would you say, if you were asked there, what would you say would be Kenya's single best achievement over the last 50 years?
Well, as I said before, the political space that we have is actually admirable, compared to other countries within Africa. That is one single achievement that we have made, and that actually happened in the last, say, 10 or 15 years, particularly during the reign of President Mwai Kibaki. I hope we're going to really have that. The other one is actually infrastructural development, which was started during the same period, and I do believe that Kenya is going to move forward in forging ahead with the infrastructural development. All right,
Mr. Osano Kuti, we'll leave it there for the moment, but thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live. We'll take a short break now on the program, but still ahead. Mourning the statesman, Nelson Mandela's body lies in state in Pretoria, where South Africans and world leaders will pay their final respects for 3 days before his final send-off. We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need fair trade and justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world. Nelson Mandela's body has been laying in an open casket for tens of thousands of people to view and say a final goodbye. The former South African president's remains will lie in state for 3 days before being moved to Kunu in the Eastern Cape for a state funeral. He died last Thursday night at his home in Johannesburg. CCTV's Guy Henderson reports from Pretoria.
Draped in the colours of the nation he helped create. As the body passed through central Pretoria shortly after 7 a.m, hundreds lined the route to say farewell. Nearly 20 years before, this same skyline saw perhaps 1 million people gathered for Nelson Mandela's inauguration. During 3 days of lying in state here, just as many, if not more, will likely come through again. Before the public he served the family he spent so many years apart from, and his widow, Graça Machel, accompanied by South African President Jacob Zuma. Dressed in grey, the last apartheid-era President F.W. de Klerk. Not friends in the talks that ended white rule, but his presence here a symbol of the nation Mandela leaves behind.
My thoughts now is I hope that his focus on lasting reconciliation will live and will bloom in South Africa.
After the washout of the day before in Soweto, this now seems to be the time for South Africans to pay tribute. Hundreds turned to thousands, turned to tens of thousands. In the sunshine, people queued for several hours, the final chance to see their hero face to face.
I wanted to pay my last homage to Nelson Mandela because he was an icon himself, and most of the people are what they are because of his legacy.
Well, there's already several thousand people queuing here. What happens next is that they'll be put onto these buses, transported to locations outside of Pretoria. They'll then be thoroughly screened. They'll have their phones and their cameras taken off them, and then only then will they be allowed on another bus which will bring them back to the Union buildings, and they'll finally be able to view the body.
Laid in an open casket, dressed in one of the colourful shirts he was renowned for, at peace after months of pain.
We had a chance of seeing Mandela at his most peaceful state. First feeling that I got was having to be in the presence of someone great. Even though they're not here in spirit, I feel as though him touching us.
This has and will be again a time for the celebration of a unique life. But for most as they left who saw, today has been one of sadness and for quiet reflection. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Pretoria, South Africa.
Indeed, South Africans have begun paying their last respects to their former leader, Nelson Mandela. And in true South African style, they danced and sang songs of praise as they waited for their turn to view his body at the Union buildings in Pretoria. CCTV's Robert Nagila with his story.
In death as in life, Nelson Mandela had succeeded in uniting the people of his beloved country. Only this time, they were celebrating his life.
The giant has fallen, but the hope has been renewed.
The country's focus has shifted to Pretoria, at least for the next 3 days, where the former president's body is lying in state at the Union building.
You are not going to hang around. You jump into the bus again, because the same bus must be used to transport people, other people.
People from all walks of life, young and old, patiently waited for their turn to view the body. Newspapers sold out as everybody tried to catch up on the events around the funeral. Some, however, were more creative in how they chose to remember the icon.
Was the remarkable way to actually say farewell to Mandela. So I went through some of the newspapers, some of the collections.
From the day of 27 years in jail until now, he taught us everything.
Even the police force, feared and hated in the same breath in South Africa, received the public's affection. Security presence both on the ground and in the air, visible. The lines leading to the Union building are expected to grow longer over the next few days as South Africans pay their last respects to the man fondly referred to here as Tata. On Saturday, he begins his final journey to his ancestral home for burial on Sunday. Robert Nagila, CCTV, Pretoria, South Africa.
And Robert Nagila joins us now from the Union buildings in Pretoria. Robert, what's happening there, though, at the Union buildings at this hour? Are crowds of people still present?
Well, no, Beatrice. That process was scheduled to end at about 5:30 this evening. It was slotted for the public from 12 p.m. I beg your pardon, from 12 p.m. midday up till 5:30, simply because in the morning that space was set aside for family members and invited dignitaries. What we're expecting is tomorrow to see more people come out because that space has been set aside for the public. Beatrice?
Robert, you're expecting more people there to show up for the next couple of days. Can you take us through a rundown of events until then?
Well, there were not too many people today. What we're expecting, because Thursday and Friday have been set aside for the public to come and view their icon, their hero, Mandela. So we are expecting more people to come out from across the country to pay their last respects as they view him here just behind me at the Union Building. However, there is a real fear that the rain could just mar that, and we could see a few people coming out. However, on Saturday, we then expect the body to be flown to the Southern Cape to his ancestral home of Kunu, and then the burial will take place on Sunday. Now, one of the reasons why the public viewing has been set up until 5:30 p.m. in the evening is because the body does not stay overnight here at the Union Building. It's transported back to a military hospital facility not far from where we are at the moment, and then brought back via procession in the morning. So we expect to see that on Thursday and Friday, which will be the last day. Then Saturday, like I said, the body will be flown to the Southern Cape, where invited dignitaries and some leaders will then be there for the burial itself. Beatrice?
Robert, there was a large gathering yesterday, a galaxy of world leaders paying their last respects there to Nelson Mandela. What is the mood of the South Africans in Pretoria?
Well, that's just it. It's been a mood of celebration, and a lot of people that you talk to on the streets here in Pretoria, and not just Pretoria, but in Johannesburg, like we did yesterday, basically say, look, we're celebrating his life. He lived a full life, and he is somebody that everybody really would wish to emulate. Now, you also have to realize that Mandela has been ill for quite a while, and the government has been preparing the public for this day. So when it came, no one was really surprised, but a lot of people, of course, saddened by the fact that he did pass away. But a lot of people saying that this is a celebration of his life. So it's the mood. It's a jubilant mood, like we witnessed today. A lot of people dancing out there, waiting for their turn to go and pay their last respects as they view his body. It is a celebratory mood, Beatrice.
All right, CCTV's Robert Nagila joining us there from Pretoria. Thank you. Well, South Africans continue paying their last respects to the fallen hero, whose remains will lie in state for 3 days ahead of the funeral service in Kunu on Sunday. Let's get more now from CCTV's Renee Delcam, who is in Kunu, where Nelson Mandela grew up. Renee, what is the general mood and reaction from the people in Kunu ahead of Sunday's funeral service for the late Mandela?
Well, as you can imagine, there's a great sadness and sense of loss hanging over Nelson Mandela's home village of Kunu here in the Eastern Cape. It's wet and cold and grey, very much reflecting the mood of the people here right now. This is the place where Rolihlahla Mandela grew up and where he was famously named Nelson by an English school teacher. This is the place where he herded cattle as a boy. And Kunu has always had a very special place in Madiba's heart. This is the village where the bones of his ancestors lie, where his parents and his children are buried, and the place which he said he always said he wanted to be laid to rest. So as expected, the people of Kunu are deeply saddened by Madiba's death, and a few are a bit unhappy because not everyone in the village will be able to attend the funeral on Sunday. As you can imagine, security will be very, very strict, and only mourners with accreditation will be granted access to the funeral.
All right, CCTV's Renee Delcam joining us there on the line from Kunu. She will be following all the developments for us up until the Sunday funeral. Thank you. Well, we'll take a short break on Africa Live now, but still ahead on the program. An Egyptian court frees a Muslim Brotherhood leader charged with insulting the judiciary. And no let-up. Violence persists in the Central African Republic as the French president seeks to boost his troops' morale.
Make major investments in China.
In child gravity. Why we are living for? That's a fundamental government position on China's by leaders. I think that's frustration. Have a dialogue, political change, and human rights. Don't you think you change human rights?
Dialogue. Ideas matter.
International news with the global perspective. World Insight is the only program with analysis from around the world, with lively discussions and feature reports. Tuning each week for World Insight, only on CCTV News.
You're watching Africa Live. An Egyptian court has freed Mohammed Mahdi Akef, a former Muslim Brotherhood leader who was charged for insulting the judiciary in an interview published in a Kuwaiti newspaper. Akef will, however, remain in jail on charges related to another case. The court accepted a request from Akef's defense that the journalist behind the article should appear in court. It has now delayed proceedings of the case until February the 11th, 2014. He denies giving the interview to the Kuwaiti newspaper Al Jarida, where the former Brotherhood leader reportedly said Egypt's judges are corrupt. The 85-year-old served as the supreme guide of the Brotherhood from 2004 to 2010.
The court has decided to delay proceedings until February the 11th, 2014. The defense has requested the attendance of Amer Husni Abdoual, a journalist with the Kuwaitian Al Jarida newspaper, and that he provides the tape recorded, which includes his conversation with the accused, as well as a specified number of copies of the publication that has the interview. The accused has been set free as long as he is not under investigation on other charges.
French President Francois Hollande has defended France's military intervention in the Central African Republic. He said the deployment of 1,600 French troops was necessary to avoid carnage, and this comes after 2 French soldiers were killed in the capital Bangui. Hollande praised French troops for tackling the violence against women and children and for helping avert a slide into civil war. Aid officials say more than 500 people have been killed over the past week in sectarian violence.
By coming to Central Africa, France is not looking for any personal interest. It has nothing to gain in its presence here and doesn't claim for any unjustified influence. France only intends to bring relief to a population that is threatened by lawless factions.
Meanwhile, fighting continued Tuesday with a Christian mob attacking a mosque in the Central African Republic's capital, Bangui. CCTV's Kate Parkinson has more.
Tensions flared in the capital on Tuesday as an angry Christian mob attacked shops belonging to Muslims. Armed with machetes and knives, they broke down the shop doors, taking anything they could carry.
They stole all the possessions from the Christians, and now it's revenge.
We're seeing scenes like this all over Bangui at the moment. Angry mobs looting, pillaging, taking out revenge. Revenge for scores of atrocities blamed on the Muslim Seleka rebel group. France now has some 1,600 troops on the ground here, patrolling neighbourhoods and trying to disarm the militants from the Seleka movement that overthrew the government in a coup earlier this year. Rebel leader turned interim president Michel Djottadia appealed for peace and unity, but placed the blame for the wave of sectarian violence firmly on the ousted President Francois Bozize.
Bozize planned a genocide. He gave out machetes and Kalashnikovs. His was a chaotic management of the country. Can I, Jotodia, solve the crisis that is happening in Kar in 2 months, 3 months, or even 8 months? All the things he did are exploding now. Everyone must be responsible for what is happening. You cannot put this responsibility on me. It is the responsibility of all the African people.
But scenes like this make peace and unity seem a long way off. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Bangui, in the Central African Republic.